Welcome to a short presentation on the enhancements in version 6.1.2 of Systems at Work software. The first of these is that we've added a clock, optionally added a clock to the timesheet. So for example, if we log in to the demonstration database as Simon Singh and we look at his current overdue timesheet, you'll see that without the clock, the notes panel opens in the usual way. However, if we log off and in Time at Work maintenance, we check the Use Clock checkbox on the timesheet type and then log in again and go back to the timesheet, you'll see that there is now a clock, as well as the notes panel. Now the clock works in this way. Let's actually start with an empty cell. If I click here, for example, the clock is initially set to 0, and if I click Start, it'll start ticking away. Now you'll notice that because of the granularity of this timesheet, the unit is hours and a quarter, the system will automatically round up to the next quarter of an hour. Now I can stop the clock and I can immediately save that back to the cell. If I open the clock again, you'll see that it starts at 15 minutes. Now if that is wrong, you can excuse me, at any time modify the value that the system is calculating for you. You see it's now gone up to half an hour because it's slightly more than 15 minutes. But if I stop that, I can always put in another value if I want to and save that. And of course, if you have different granularities for different timesheet types, then it will work in a slightly different way. So that's clocks. The next enhancement is that we have made it possible to route forms and on the basis of activity analysis. Just to explain what that means, let's suppose that you have a form such as an expense form. Actually, I'm using the wrong one here. This one. In this form, we have as a header field, for example, a cost center. Now, in some organizations, you might want to route the form to an authorizer depending on that value, header activity analysis. Now, that wasn't possible before, but it is now. If we look at the activity analysis values for those charge to fields. Now, professional services, for example, might have Simon Singh as department manager. And what you can do in the routing rules, which we look at here in Time at Work maintenance, is that you can now specify for a given form type, that perhaps instead of the form going to the line manager of the employee who's filled in the form, you might send it instead to the department manager. So what the system does is to evaluate the value of the activity analysis. And of course, if it's a header activity analysis, it will be the same value on every row within the form. In fact, it evaluates only the first row in the form. And it determines from the value of the analysis value field, it determines who fulfills the role of department manager, and it would route the form accordingly. This is something that many clients have asked us for. The system will actually do this even if the activity analysis field is not defined as a header field. In all cases, it evaluates the value of the field on the first row of the form. When the activity analysis field is a header field, then of course the value is the same on all rows in the form. But it will work where activity analysis is not the header field. So that is routing by activity analysis role. The next enhancement is a very small one, which I will describe rather than show. It is that when you have selectable routing for a form, so for example, if you're submitting a form, sometimes you can be asked from a group of people to which one you want to send the form for authorization or for review. In some cases, that list at some of our clients has proved to be very long, and it's been awkward finding the appropriate person. And we've now made it possible in the grid that is presented to you from which you make that choice. It's possible to filter and sort the list of employees there. The next thing is transmission text. This is a small thing, but nevertheless it has been an irritant even for me in setting up the system, that you that when you are setting up transmission text, sometimes you want the text to be the same regardless of how many steps there are in routing. Perhaps I'll go back to routing rules just to explain that. As you know, there are options for routing here. 10 steps for authorization, 10 additional steps for authorization. So altogether, 21 steps potentially for authorization. Now, very often you want the transmission text to be the same for all steps, but until now, it was necessary to set up explicitly transmission text. Now, transmission text is the basis for the emails that are sent to the next person who has to do something in workflow. Now you can set up a transmission text for all steps. So you only have to set up, say, an email once that might say something like, there is a form for you to authorize. You don't have to set that up for step 1, step 2, step 3, and so on. Just set it up for all. It's just a time-saving option. The next thing is, again, something that I will describe rather than show, and that is simply to say that we have now made the single sign-on technology within Systems at Work work with Active Directory federated services. This makes it possible for you to use single sign-on with, say, a hosted version of Time at Work, Expense at Work, or Form at Work. Another couple of technical things. We have greatly improved the performance of the evaluation of approvals. Now, I don't know whether you've noticed, but sometimes when you log into Time at Work, if you're using approvals, that is, there can be quite a long delay before the home page is shown, and that's because the system is evaluating whether are there any approvals for you to do. Approvals are shown here, for example. You see the approval panel, and you would see that there are records for you to approve, transactions for you to approve, and the evaluation of that is now very much faster. Another performance improvement we've done is that freeze pane in all contexts is now faster. Freeze pane is this mechanism here. You see that we freeze the panes. It's something that you can probably familiar with. You can change that freeze pane as well. So the execution of what happens now when I click here is now faster. About twice as fast, we think. Another tiny thing that we've done in order to make this system cloud ready is to provide the option of the number of hours in a day on the system parameters page. It's a tiny thing. This is the field which is, or the value that is used to calculate between the 3 values that are always held for timesheet transactions, that is days, hours, and minutes. Now, obviously you can derive minutes from hours or hours from minutes very easily, but in terms of days, sometimes in some countries it's an 8-hour day, sometimes 7 hours, sometimes 7.5. and so you need to provide this for the system so that it can calculate days from hours or hours from days. Another thing that we've done is that it's now possible to use this import-export tool for importing and exporting static data such as employees, clients, projects, tasks, and so on, without having permission for every tab on the record. You know that within the system it's possible to limit which of these tabs an individual can see. And before 6.1.2, in fact in version 6.1, when we first launched that version, you could only do import-export if you had access to every tab. That is no longer the case. It proves impractical. Another small thing to overcome an irritant is that now when you complete a task, such as completing this timesheet, where there is only one in this list, once you say submitted or authorized a timesheet, if it's the only one in the list, the system will now take you back to the home page rather than to an empty list. Those then are the enhancements in 6.1.2, and that concludes this video.